sort of miracle cure for all your woes in life. But mostly it works by dealing with a part of ourself which is often neglected. And because this part of ourselves is something that is woven into everything we do in our lives, then they are not too far wrong by saying that meditation can have a helpful role to play in many aspects of our life. So the part which I'm talking about is our mind, but as meditation defines it, it doesn't mean our brain or our nervous system, but rather our sense of awareness or our focus of attention. And it's something which is often pulled away from where we are to all the things around us in the world which are trying to compete for our attention the whole of the time. In the present day and age, there are so many of those things that sometimes it's hard to find any gaps between the distractions to recharge the batteries of our mind or our awareness. So meditation hopes to be able to provide a way to do this so that we can have some sense of replenishing the energies of the mind after a day spent focusing on so many other demanding things. And the way it does that is by relocating the focus of one's awareness from all the things out there back to a place within the space of the body. And although there are many different ways of meditating, but basically they are all different ways of doing just that, which is to relocate the focus of awareness within the space of the body. And there is a special place inside the body where, if we are able to focus, then it's particularly efficient for recharging the batteries of the mind. And this is a place down on the level of our diaphragm. You might call it our solar plexus. And if you were to take a deep breath in, to the deepest possible breath, then the point where the breath turns around before it comes back out again is exactly the point that we're talking about. So we're trying to find a way to bring our awareness to that point and to maintain it there if we can. One way which you may have heard of to allow you to do this is by using the breath itself. And if you were to focus on the breath and allow the breath to bring your awareness down to that deepest point, then that would be a good way to keep your awareness down at that point at your solar plexus. Unfortunately, though, the breath is always on the move, so you are always working with a moving target. And for that reason, I generally propose an even simpler way to focus the mind, which is to use a picture in the mind, which you conjure up in your imagination. So you might think of a picture of, let's say, the sun shining, or perhaps the full moon, or a star, or perhaps a diamond. And you conjure up that picture in your mind and bring it to that point there, then the mind will follow. As long as you have that picture in your imagination, and it hasn't disappeared, then the awareness will also be at that point as well. If your attention wanders off, then you just bring it back again to the picture. If the picture disappears, you can conjure up a new one. And for some people who are not particularly visual by nature, it might be the feeling that you have an object there, the presence of an object that you can feel and touch, rather than a picture of it. So if it's more of a feeling than a picture, don't worry about that. It will work in exactly the same way. Some people, though, have an additional complication in their meditation, which is an excess of thoughts in the mind. We all have a certain amount of thought, and generally, if thoughts are at a low level, the way we would overcome them is to pretend that we're ignoring them. And if you ignore them for long enough, then they will tend to die down into silence, leaving you to be able to focus on that inner object. But for some people who are joining us today who have more than the usual helping of thoughts in the mind, who are perhaps so inundated with thoughts that it's hard to find a space in between the thoughts to even think about ignoring them, then you may need a little bit of extra help, which might come in the form of what's known as a mantra, which is to use some sort of phrase that you repeat again in your imagination, to block the verbal channel of the mind. And in our tradition, we tend to use the phrase, it's Indian in origin, Samma Arahang, which you can see on the slide. But it may be that you want to use your own mantra, set of words, or affirmation, or even something from your own faith tradition, in which case you can substitute that in, no problem at all. And you hear the sound of those words as if it comes from the same place down at your solar plexus, for as long as you need it to dispel the thoughts. Yeah? Generally, anytime you meditate, we don't just jump straight in and do the exercise with imagining the thoughts, but we do a little bit of preparation first of all. The first part of this is to do with the comfort of our physical body. Part of that is to do with having a good posture, so generally sitting up fairly straight, even if you're on a chair, to sit with your back fairly straight. If you're sitting cross-legged on the floor, then like in the previous picture, sitting ideally in a half-lotus position with one foot up on the calf of the other leg, or a looser cross-legged position. But however you sit, the way to put your hands together is with the right hand on top of the left hand, index finger of the right hand up against the thumb of the left hand, and your hands just rest palm upwards in your lap. Or you can adapt that. Basically, the more comfortable you are in your physical posture, the better it's going to be for the meditation, because it allows you to forget about your body more quickly. As for the preparation for the mind, which is normally the second 5 minutes of any meditation, it's mostly to do with putting aside any immediate worries on our mind and conjuring up a positive state of mind for ourselves. And only then do we do the exercise with conjuring up that inner object and using the mantra where necessary. So that's a good. Normally on a Tuesday night we sit for about a half an hour, so if you'd like to make yourself comfortable for some meditation now. So if you'd like to start by settling yourself down into a comfortable posture for your meditation. If you'd like to close your eyes very gently and find a comfortable position for yourself with your back and spine in an upright, although relaxed posture. And you can withdraw your attention from any thoughts by taking a few slow, deep breaths to yourself. Inhaling fully and exhaling slowly. Allow your body and your breath to settle naturally. And you might like to check how you're feeling right now in this present moment. Taking note of any sensations in your body. Just creating a space for those sensations to arise while letting them be. And each time we meditate, to make sure our body is as relaxed as possible, we do what's known as a body scan, scanning down through the whole of our body, while relaxing each and every muscle as we go. So So we scan down from the very top of our head, relaxing the muscles of our scalp, allowing that wave of relaxation to scan down through our face, relaxing our eyes and our eyelids, allowing our jaw to loosen while relaxing our lips. Imagining the tide of relaxation to flow down through our neck and our shoulders. And from there, relaxing our upper arms, allowing the relaxation to make its way around our elbows, down through our forearms, around our wrists, through the palms of our hands, all the way down through our fingers to our fingertips, allowing them all to relax completely. From there we allow the tide of relaxation to continue on down as we feel our lungs relaxing and contracting, relaxing our shoulders, our upper back, relaxing our spine and our lower back, relaxing our abdomen and our stomach. And then allowing that tide of relaxation to move further on down into our upper legs, around our knees, through our lower legs, around our ankles, heels, the soles of our feet, all the way down to the tips of our toes, until we're left with a feeling as if the whole of our body has become free of any stress or tension, with our whole posture being one of comfort, allowing us to forget about our body as far as possible, so that we can turn our attention to relaxing the mind. In order to put ourselves in the mood for the meditation, we might imagine that we're sitting in our favorite place in nature. Around us there is no one and nothing. We are sitting in a beautiful place where we feel safe and secure. You might imagine that the weather is beautiful, that the sky is clear and vast, and beautifully blue in color. We might imagine feeling the warmth of the sun on our face and our skin, or the touch of a gentle breeze brushing softly against our skin, leaving us with a sense of ease and contentment. Allowing us to set aside any thoughts we might be having of the past or the future, but rather cherishing the here and now, these precious moments that we have set aside for ourselves, for our meditation. And having created a sense of happiness and spaciousness, both in body and in mind, at this point we might envision inside our body to be completely empty, without any muscles or tissue or organs, just an empty space inside us, but one filled instead with a sense of happiness and joy. And within this empty space of the body, we allow our attention very softly and gently to make its way down within the space of the body to a point located 2 fingers width above the level of our navel. Somewhere around the area of our diaphragm or our solar plexus. And if you're not sure where the center of your body is actually located, then anywhere in the general area of the stomach will do. And as an anchor for the mind, we might envision a bright object within ourselves, such as a shining sun, a full moon, or a star, at the center of our body. Sometimes in this meditation tradition, we even can imagine a crystal ball as the object of our meditation, as a symbol of spaciousness that is easily accessible to us, as a symbol which is familiar to us. But however you decide to anchor your awareness, even if it's nothing more than a feeling that you have an object at the center of yourself, maintain your attention evenly, steadily at that point. Remain in touch with that inner object by means of that good feeling that you've built up so far in your meditation. Feeling the presence of that object at the center of yourself. For some people there may be an excess of thoughts in the mind. And if the thoughts are at a low level, it may be possible to get away with simply ignoring those thoughts. But if you find you still have thoughts arising in the mind, even when you ignore them, you might try making use of that traditional mantra, hearing the sound of words such as Samma Arahang, Samma Arahang, Samma Arahang, coming up as if from the very center of your body. resonating from the same place that you have your inner object, while allowing the mind to settle naturally and peacefully at the same point. If you find your mind wandering, as soon as you notice, then bring it gently back again to the center. And if the inner object disappears, you can simply think of a new one. The object changes on its own. There's no need to change it back again, you just follow it in its new form. Your practice may become one of observation rather than visualization. And as we meditate more, we become more familiar with the idea of there being a space between our thoughts. A space between where one thought ends and another one begins. Because we start to find that we're able to step back from the thinking that we're usually so used to in our minds. We're able to step back from the thought we always take for granted. And this allows us to gain access to that sense of spaciousness in the mind. The spaciousness that lies beyond those thoughts, allowing us to touch upon that sense of clarity in the mind that brings with it a sense of resilience and stability. And as we engage with that sense of spaciousness more and more, we'll also notice the way in which any previous stresses and strains in the mind seem to gradually melt away, leading us to yet deeper levels of inner peace. But in the meantime, we still have to work with the phenomenon of the wandering mind and the thoughts arising. We need to learn to observe these mental phenomena, treating them as nothing more than the manifestation of impermanence in our mind. Observing without interfering how the thoughts and emotions arise and pass away naturally in the mind, without getting caught up in these. Treating them as no more significant than clouds or turbulence, passing through a blue sky that is essentially clear. By identifying with the stillness that is the backdrop to all these thoughts, we learn to access something deeper. It is of the nature of deep, peaceful intuition and wisdom. And once we have our first glimpse of it, then to be something we recognize in future meditations, motivating us further to continue to develop these skills, to the point that even if a sense of restlessness arises in the mind, we can even learn to watch the restlessness while disassociating from it, while remaining all the time in contact with that sense of spaciousness in the mind. As our mind becomes unhooked from that restlessness or angst, allowing us to settle yet more deeply as we meditate for a few more moments now in silence, until we come to the appropriate time for some loving kindness meditation. Don't forget, if your mind wanders off onto other things, each time you realize, simply bring your awareness back again to the center of the body as before. If the inner object disappears, we can conjure up a new one. If it changes, we follow it in its new form. And for those who feel able, towards the end of each meditation, traditionally we pick up on the positive energy, whether it be something we see, like inner illumination, something we feel, like a sense of well-being, or imagery within the mind, large or small. And if we place our mind very gently at the center of that inner experience, often we can allow that inner experience to spread outwards from that central point as part of a practice known as the spreading of loving kindness, where we cultivate and generate feelings of compassion for ourselves and thereafter toward all sentient beings in the world. But it's important for us to have that sense of compassion or loving kindness as a starting point. And in this respect, we might start with the image of a dear friend or a family member who we care deeply about. It could even be a pet that we care about. And imagining that that person or loved one is right in front of you. You connect with the feeling of loving kindness that you have for them, with the feeling of gratitude that they're in your life. You can imagine those feelings of loving kindness growing and expanding outwards, as if from the center of your own body. Imagining this feeling of loving kindness extending outwards through every cell of your body, all the way from the top of your head right the way down to the tips of your toes, radiating outward from your center. And in this way we start by extending loving kindness toward ourselves first of all, with the wish that may I be happy, may I be healthy in body and mind. May I face my difficulties with good grace and serenity. May I take care of myself in happiness. And taking note of these feelings of compassion, care and kindness, tenderness and openness, we send forth these feelings to ourselves. And from there, if we can, we imagine these feelings growing and radiating outwards from the center of our body, initially to the whole of our body, almost like a perfect protective bubble, and then extending beyond the boundaries of our own body, outwards into the whole room around us like an aura or a halo, taking in all the people around us, reaching out to all the people who we care deeply about, imagining them uplifted in body, mind and spirit, as they respond to our loving kindness, to the care and gratitude we have for them. And in the same way we continue cultivating and generating these feelings of loving kindness, expanding them further outwards to the whole building. So the source is our center, but the radius of our loving kindness extends to the whole building. Wider still, to our friends, to our family, to all the people in our neighborhood, even including those who we might not know very well. We might even extend loving kindness toward others with whom we might not see eye to eye. But We extend that loving kindness with the wish that may everyone in our community be safe, be happy, be peaceful. May they be healthy in body and mind. May they be able to face their difficulties with good grace and serenity. And may they experience peacefulness and contentment in life. We imagine these feelings growing and expanding further still, the whole town, borough, county, then to all our fellow townsfolk, extending to all living beings on the land, in the air, or in the sea, to the very borders of our country, neighboring countries, entire continents, until our sense of loving kindness extends across the whole of the face of this planet. Touching people, sentient beings on every continent, the wish that all living beings be well and happy, free from suffering, live together in peace and harmony. That world peace become a reality within our own lifetimes. For the final few moments of our loving kindness meditation, we might imagine the extent of our loving kindness expanding outwards into the whole universe. Extending our loving kindness in this way for the last few moments of our meditation in silence. Sape Buddha Palapata Pachekananja Yambalang Arahantananja Techena Arakambandami Sapaso Sapaputanupavena Sapatammanupavena Sapasankhanupavena Sattha Soti Bhavantu Te. So we'd like to come to the end of your meditation for this evening. You can gradually open your eyes again If you feel at all uncomfortable, then slowly try changing to a more comfortable position before gradually finishing your practice. So far, so good, everyone. New folks had something to focus on the inside? Ish. It may come and go, but with practice it will stay more than it goes. So it's a question of familiarizing ourselves with the dynamics of the inner world of the mind, and meditation will gradually become more like second nature to us. Yes. Well, normally Tuesday nights are billed as something like life and love. And in this connection, it may not be a surprise, therefore, that we come again to the topic of cherishing one's spouse. It's not the most comfortable subject for me, but this is the second installment of a talk which I started last Tuesday. And the reason why this particular topic has come up is because I am at the moment working my way through a sort of series of different virtues and values derived from Buddhist scriptures. And they start with some quite basic sort of values and practices in life and work towards more esoteric ones. But there is a subsection which I am working my way through at the moment, which is to do with harmony in the family life. And having talked about looking after our parents and looking after our children, then the next logical stop is looking after one's spouse. And some of the things which I talked about last time were things like, why would people want to get married in the first place? And like whether just living together, is that good enough? And then the sort of responsibilities which are implied in a long-term relationship. And then other things which I did talk about were sometimes it's not the sort of person you're looking for, but the sort of person you want to be in a marriage. And also some of the ideas of compatibility between two parties in a marriage as well. But today we come to the idea of how to keep a marriage going. And the reason for this is that unlike some short relationships like speed dating or dating generally, marriage can be rather more like running a marathon than running a 100-meter sprint. And this raised the question of how a couple can sustain a sense of joy of their initial encounters while developing a sense of love and understanding through their marriage. How can a couple bring out the best in each other rather than running off to get a divorce at the first sign of a quarrel? And there's an American psychologist who specializes in such things called John Gottman, and he wrote a whole book about what predicts divorce. And he discovered that when conflicts within a marriage lead to something called stonewalling, which means where a husband and wife or a couple are no longer on speaking terms, then the further life expectancy of that marriage tends not to exceed 3 years. So, although conflicts might not be something that you can avoid completely in a marriage, but it seems that that's not the important thing. The important thing is about what you can do to keep open the channels of communication. And in this respect, the Buddha therefore never recommended plastic surgery or spicing up a marriage as a way to keep a marriage going, but he did emphasize instead this idea of communication. So, rather like Mr. Gottman, he said that the gravest enemies in a marriage can be distrust and suspicion. So to keep open those good channels of communication, he recommended 4 things, which are otherwise known as a good or a healthy emotional bank account with your partner. The technical term for these is the Sangahawatu, which are 4 ways of maintaining a healthy emotional bank account with the other partner in your marriage. So the first of these is being generous to each other. So being able to share what you have. If you feel that you're holding back something, individual, an asset, or information or whatever, then it's important to learn to share as much as possible. To be open about any problems concerning material resources, for example. Second one is how you talk to each other during speech, known technically in Buddhism as piya vacha. Couples should always be polite to one another, hopefully, even in cases where they need to criticize one another, or especially when they need to criticize one another. If they become too informal, then sometimes the careless words can slip in and perturb the harmony. So before saying something, you might like to ask yourself whether it would be fit to print. And even things which you might not think too much about, like perhaps sarcasm on the receiving end, it might be thought about rather differently. So by belittling your partner's efforts, it might actually hurt them more than you calculated if you're not at all careful. Third thing is being helpful. So rather than laying all the blame on the other partner when something is amiss, you need to take collective responsibility for things. So solving the problem instead of finding someone to blame. And part of that helpfulness might be anticipating your partner's needs. It might be things which you don't expect. It might be quality time, or it might be time alone. It might be the special cookies. It might be occasional evening away from the children. And you shouldn't get defensive when your partner voices a need, because actually it's saving you quite a lot of guesswork. So you need to be a good listener, in other words. And lastly, consistency. There are some sort of implied duties in a marriage, which I'll come to shortly. And they help to diminish any possible suspicion. But let's say you've decided amongst yourself that one or other of the partners should take responsibility for the running of the house, then the other partner should not subsequently come and interfere in that. That's to do with trusting. Another thing which is often a sort of stumbling block is privately texting. I notice a lot of families these days have a family email account. That helps to support a sense of openness in a family. Yeah. And also meditating together on a daily basis helps each other to tune in more to what's going on. Yes. So very traditionally within Buddhism, they give husbands and wives, because it's pretty hard to make this sort of gender neutral. But we will try as far as it's possible. But the husband is given the duty to give due praise to his wife. And this might mean admiring your spouse in comparison to others, because it makes them feel more valued and irreplaceable. So just saying something as simple as, "There's no one who makes a better cup of coffee," means more than just saying it's a nice cup of coffee. And some husbands say, "She already knows that she's beautiful, I don't need to keep telling her that, because that's why I married her." But sometimes saying it out loud does give it more value. Just because it's assumed, it doesn't sometimes come over quite as well. Second thing, never looking down on the wife. I think these days it might be called mansplaining. You know mansplaining? Women do, yes. Or being degrading toward your wife in front of family or friends. Yeah. Third thing, never being unfaithful. There is a Buddhist teaching called the Dhammakaya Sutta, which describes the feeling of husbands found guilty of cheating, that, and I quote, "whatever fame and reputation he had before, of course, vanishes. In the grip of his fantasies, he broods like a beggar. Hearing the outrage of others, he gets depressed. Hearing the spread of gossip, he then hides his own embarrassment. He cannot accept the criticism of others on this count, and may lie to those who try to counsel him." So, none good for your sense of personal integrity. Fourthly, reach agreement on delegation of domestic responsibilities. This is a slightly more first wave feminism wording I've chosen here. Whatever is a healthy work-life balance, whatever the professional roles husband and wife need to come to some sort of agreement, according to the principles of the emotional bank account I just mentioned, whereby domestic responsibilities are not neglected. Brain scientists apparently claim that wives are more skilled in multitasking. Nonetheless, juggling and balancing work, life, home life, social life is likely to be more efficient if both husband and wife are on the same page. And lastly, a husband should not forget to do small things for his wife. This actually comes from the scriptures, and probably 2,000 years ago, the sort of scenario would be the husband would be away on business trips, and therefore any little gifts brought back for the wife would be a way to express love and appreciation despite his absence. And such small details can have a huge impact on how the other partner is left feeling about the relationship. So even if it's a small thing like filling up the car with gas the night before, so she doesn't have to do it in the morning in a rush on the way to work, small acts of kindness often are the only thing that would get the other partner through a crazy busy day. And there are 5 for the wife. Reciprocal, you might call them. But the domestic responsibilities, having been shared out, there needs to be somebody in the house to ensure that the house is peaceful, and the food is nourishing, and the house is truly a home for the family. Secondly, another possible stumbling block is the in-laws. The wife is normally given the charged with the responsibility to be especially careful with how she treats the in-laws. Otherwise, there will be serious diplomatic consequences. Thirdly, not being unfaithful, for the same reasons I mentioned earlier, for the husband. Fourthly, looking after the family wealth. Surprising? I was surprised when I went to Thailand and I found that who runs the household? The wife. The wife is empowered to oversee the family finances. Husband brings the pay packet home, hands it over to the wife, who divides it up and gives him his pocket money, sort of thing. And the rest goes to looking after the family and running the household. Yeah. But it ought to be done in a way that's not stingy and not extravagant. Lastly, filling in any gaps in domestic responsibilities. I'd say first wave feminism. Again, their wording, divided up. The chores, they may not always be split right down the middle, but sometimes one of you might find that they're ending up doing more cleaning than the other one, which is okay as long as it gets bounced out down the road. And even though you've decided that it's his task to do the laundry, even if he happens to be especially busy that week, then the wife should avoid the humming and hurrying too much about handling it. Just throwing in a load of washing without making a fuss will show that you are a team. And there are 10 more principles for a happy marriage, again from the scriptures. So, don't let the fire inside go outside. Normally you hear, don't let the fire go out. Well, there's quite a lot of fires in these 10. Hopefully you can read them, yes. Actually, this comes from a lady we all know from the Buddhist scriptures, Lady Visakha. We heard about her with the old and new food, if you remember back. She was married out into a family of people who were not very sympathetic to her sort of faith in Buddhism. So she had to work quite hard to fit in. And on the day she left her home for her new family, her father gave her these 10 principles for how to settle into her new life. So not letting the fire inside go outside means not letting your family's dirty washing be spread about outside the family. Second one, not let the fire outside come inside. Any guesses? So all the sort of problems, controversies, and general hot gossip or whatever problems from elsewhere, don't let that come in and disturb your family harmony on the inside. Thirdly, and the next 3 are to do with sharing with others. Give to those who give to us, which means people who've helped you or your family in the past, especially the in-laws, things you've lent out to other people and they have returned them, then you should allow them to borrow them next time around. However, those we should avoid giving to those who have given nothing to us. So, if you lend things to people and they have not returned them, then next time you shouldn't lend it to them again. Make sense? Or maybe not helping people who have refused to help us in the past. Nonetheless, number 5 is, whether people have helped us or not, we should try to help people as much as we can. So, especially if people have fallen on hard times, then we should always see what we can do to help. Number 6, make sure the food is amenable. So we had this right the way back to blessing number 4, but if the family meals are nutritious, we can't all be a so-called Susie homemaker, but especially if we have a career of our own, but it shouldn't be too much trouble to learn how to make a few favorite dishes because there are these days endless food blogs which you can study to find new creations that can be simple and fast. And good food goes a long way to bringing people in the family together. Number 7, have an amenable place to sit. That may sound like selecting armchairs, but in fact it actually means yielding respect where necessary. So having respect especially for your partner. Don't be in too much of a hurry to pass off the kids on your partner. Immediately they come through the door from work. But maybe take a moment to establish more of an atmosphere of appreciation and respect. Number 8, find an amenable place to sleep. Means that being in your home should be a restful place, a place where people can have their downtime. May not always be perfect, but it should be as relaxing as possible. And classically within Buddhism, parents might have to make great sacrifices, such as being the first up in the morning and the last to go to bed at night. Number 9, here we come back to fires again. Quench the fire to keep the marriage going, which means you may need to take special care of in-laws or the spouse when they are on fire, in other words, in a bad temper. I had a special tip from Wendy earlier. If you are both angry, then try not to be angry at the same time. You can take it in turns, yes. And even if they should unload on us in an unpleasant way, then it might be necessary to hold our silence for now instead of us answering back immediately. Waiting until they've simmered down before perhaps explain the real reason for a situation. There is such a thing known as a plastic smile. Probably known as a fake smile these days. But sometimes if we can have a smile, even if it's not particularly genuine in the beginning, but with practice it becomes more genuine. But a smile can sometimes signal the willingness to turn the corner on an unpleasant situation, even if it's a plastic one. And lastly, number 10, be respectful of the angels. Who are the angels? The in-laws, yes. As for a spiritual side of marriage, spiritually speaking, two partners in a marriage might not be quite on the same page. Some might be more faithful than the other. But the idea of bringing out the best in one another is to encourage each other to practice more, to get on the same page. And within the context of Buddhism, this might mean meditating more, hearing wisdom talks from monks, keeping precepts, or practicing generosity. Some are scared to encourage their spouse to involve themselves too much with things like meditation, spirituality, that sort of thing. Some have made a sarcastic comment that I want a wife in the home, not a nun. However, they should really be grateful that they have such a high-minded better half, rather than someone who's creating problems for them. However, not all marriages last. And in a typical way of our throwaway society, some people feel that if their marriage is not working, then someone has to be blamed and just do a part exchange, or maybe a full exchange for a new partner, and all your problems will be solved, right? And you get a sort of this idea of serial monogamy happening in society, which doesn't seem to create a great deal of happiness for anyone. And in this connection, if it should come to some sort of question of whether divorce is the right way forward, there are two scenarios. First is that you want to divorce because you are bored of this particular partner. And the second one is that you are bored of marriage in general. And the Buddhist attitude would be divorce is okay, but if you are only thinking to get rid of this partner so you can move along to the next one, then it's generally a bad idea, because although you think that you are escaping all the bad features of your previous partner, what you will find on the next marriage is that actually all the problems will be the same, because it's not them creating the problem, it's you. It's your weaknesses, it's your shortcomings, which you haven't changed. So therefore, it would be better to try and work things out on the first instance rather than going for divorce. Second one, though, that if you're just bored of marriage in general, then that might be a slightly more justifiable reason to move on from marriage rather than a particular marriage. Some reasons, though, for example, domestic violence, from my experience of Buddhist couples in Thailand, is that there is zero tolerance for that. And that would be a reason to get out. So to finish up with, I have a little bit of a story, and it is a story about infidelity in marriage, consequences of. Some of you may be familiar with the Hound of the Baskervilles. It's a little bit like that. But it goes back to a time of the previous Buddha called Buddha Kassapa, and a city called Kimbila, where there was a very pious supporter of the Buddha who had attained the first level of enlightenment, known as stream entry. And he had a large group of friends who used to go to the temple often and did many good works in the temple, volunteering to do things like planting parks, building bridges, building a beautiful monastery for the monks to live in. And they would go to that monastery, and in the free time they would listen to what the monks were instructing and teaching about as well. Meanwhile, the wives of the same group of men also were also quite pious supporters of the temple, and they used to go to the monastery quite often as well and bring offerings for the monks. And along the way, because it was some distance to the temple, they used to take a break along the way and at what were known as rest houses, which is sort of a place where you could, I guess, like wayside inns. And one day the whole group of the wives went to a rest house, and there were a group of musicians in the rest house. A little bit like a rock group in the present day, probably with rather similar habits. They took a shine to these sort of very virtuous-looking women who looked beautiful and graceful and all that. And at first, the women were quite advanced by these sort of young people, young men coming onto them. So the musicians, they laid a wager amongst themselves, a little bit like the sort of Cruel Intentions scenario, whether they could compromise the virtue of one of the women in the group. So they all played seductive songs and this sort of thing, and I think there was probably alcohol in the mix there somewhere. And later one of the women became enamored of one of the musicians and committed adultery. And later, when the husband found out, she denied it. And she pointed at a nearby dog and said, if I had done such an evil deed, then let an earless dog like that one eat me whenever I am reborn. And that day on, however, so the husband had to sort of take her on her word, but she languished, and not long afterwards she died with a very bad conscience. And she died and was reborn in a rather strange existence. Have you heard of hungry ghosts? Have you heard of ghosts? Okay, so that's sort of Buddhism 101. So ghosts are normally like wafting around mixed up with human beings, and it's just like not too much different from human beings, except the fact they haven't got a physical body anymore. That's one possibility for a rebirth. Hungry ghosts are a little bit worse in that they're sort of ghosts too, but they are in a state of extreme hunger. They cannot feed themselves. So it's like they're not only ghosts, sort of immaterial, but they also have this sense of hunger, which they are plagued with the whole time. So the whole life is a sort of suffering. And then there's a special sort of hungry ghost, which is like a half and half, reserved for people who have done a mixture of good and bad things in their past. And they get to be the hungry ghost part for the part that wasn't so good about their life. And sometimes that's in the nighttime, but during the daytime, they get to be like an angel in a nice sort of a heavenly state. So they have to have this lifestyle where they have a mix of the two. And this particular lady, because she'd done lots of things to help the temple, so she got that good aspect. And she had a nice heavenly mansion to live in on the shores of a heavenly lake known as Ganamunta in what is known as the Himawanta forest. So basically the first level of heaven. Not particularly high up, but okay, go with that. And by her little heavenly mansion was a nice lotus pond surrounded by other heavenly mansions. And at this point, I should give a little trigger warning for anyone who doesn't want to hear about being eaten by dogs. You might want to plug your ears at this point. Every night, however, she had to come out. She would wake up from her heavenly mansion and make her way down to the water's edge by her lotus pond, where a dog like this one was waiting for her. Rather similar to the one she pointed out when she lied to her husband. And she would have to surrender herself to be chomped up by this dog and all her bones thrown in the lotus pond afterwards. Every night. And yet every morning she would reconstitute herself into her heavenly form, come climbing out of the pond and go back and live in her heavenly mansion like before. Strange, eh? So anyone who says that good and bad things in our life cancel out, be careful. Huh? But yes, this is a little bit of a sort of cautionary tale about marital infidelity, even if you might say she was set up. Yes. I think the smart thing in this case would have been to be honest. Yeah. Anyway, a few final announcements for today. For those of you who are new to meditation today, I would like to say well done for having our first meditation. But meditation at its best is cultivated on a regular basis. And if you can manage to find 20 minutes a day to meditate, maybe first thing in the morning, if you like a nice start to the day, maybe last thing at night, if you are a sort of person who has problems sleeping, if you can do that every day, whether it be a good day or a bad day, then little by little your meditation will on average start to improve, and you'll see that for yourself. The important thing is to make a sort of routine of it, so it is easy for you to remember. so that even on the days when it doesn't seem obvious to meditate, you meditate anyway, and that will carry you over into improvement in your mental progress. And you'll find that little by little in your 20 minutes you can go further, faster, and maybe you might be inclined to increase the length of time as well. In this respect, sometimes it's not easy to remember the method of meditation, in which case we have an app for that, known as Mind Gem, which you can download onto your mobile phone, and you'll find that it will lead you through the meditation, and you can select a length of time. You can even have a timer there to lead you through the meditation in a way that you can listen to a different track each time, and it makes it a little bit more, let's say, gives you something new to listen to each time. Here at the Meditation Center in Nap Hill, we have Tuesday evening classes, which are normally 30 minutes of meditation long, and on Thursdays it's a little bit longer meditation, 45 minutes. Apart from that, there's usually a wisdom talk to listen to at the end as well. Apart from that, online, for those of you who like to meditate from the comfort of your home, every Saturday evening between 7 and 8 British time, there is a Zoom meditation, which is one of the remnants of what we've been doing throughout the pandemic, still going on, and it's joined by meditators from all over Europe. Exceptionally, once a month, we also have a special, what's known as a full moon meditation, and for May, this will happen on Sunday the 15th of May, not only online via the same Zoom channel, but also in person, and we have a special ceremony here for the first time since the pandemic, where we have a candle lighting ceremony. It also coincides with the Buddha's birthday, so there'll be lots of different Buddhist monks and dignitaries coming from different traditions. If you'd like to see what they look like, you can come along and join in with that. And also the mayor is doing the opening, and we also have our resident clinical psychologist from across the road will give a short talk about the benefits of meditation and mindfulness for mental health as well. For young men amongst you, during the month of June, there's the opportunity to try out being a monk for 2 weeks or 4 weeks at a pinch, and the venue for that this year will be Denmark, near Copenhagen. For those who might be interested to join that, you can look it up on the website eopdmc.eu. And the next meditation retreat for a weekend that we are organizing, we try to do this once every 3 months. Next time we have lined up a special place for that, where if we can get enough people for it, then we will go ahead and run the retreat in a nice place down in the West Country in Somerset, called the Open Pathway Retreat Center, which is nice and in nature and that sort of thing, and they have nice luxuries like your own bed to sleep in, which some of you may remember as being an improvement on having it here. Yes. So for today, that's all I think I have for you, but if you have any questions, comments or feedback at this point, I'd be very pleased to hear from you. If you enjoy happiness, success and prosperity in life, go far in your meditation and enjoy all the benefits of happiness and harmony in your family life.